Hi everyone. So thanks so much for joining us tonight, and thank you, Simon, for our introduction. So we're really excited to be here tonight to talk to you all about the Big City Butterflies project, which launched last year. I'm here, so I'm the engagement officer, and my name's Ellie, and my colleague Steve's also on the call, and he's the conservation officer. So we're going to take it in turns to give you an update on how it's gone so far and what we are looking forward to in the future as well. But to start off with, I'm just going to give a brief introduction to the project, just in case people aren't familiar. So to start with, Butterfly Conservation's Big City Butterflies project is a National Lottery Heritage funded project. So we're really grateful to be supported by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and obviously it wouldn't be possible without them. It's a 4-year project, and we're actually operating across 17 boroughs in London, so quite a wide project area, but we do have the 4 years to make our mark and do the work across London. So as Simon mentioned earlier, the development phase was a little while ago, and we actually started in May last year. And Simon mentioned that myself and Steve really hit the ground running this year, as it was in peak butterfly season that we started. So in a nutshell, Big City Butterflies is all about inspiring Londoners to discover butterflies and moths and connect them with nature and their local green spaces as well. So looking at the last slide, it's a typical view of London with all the high-rise buildings. So you might think that London might not be the best place for a butterfly and moth conservation project. But this is a bit of a different view of London, and actually almost 50% of London is green space. So we have a number of sites of special scientific interest, 147 local nature reserves, a large amount of sites of importance for nature conservation, and also over 3,000 parks and open spaces. And with all of those green sites, there's a huge potential for London to be an even better place for butterflies and moths, and for all of those green spaces to support butterfly and moth populations. So going on to the project in a bit more detail, what do we want to achieve? Well, we're hoping to help Londoners to discover and connect with butterflies, moths, and the green spaces that support them. So really using our expertise and knowledge to inspire people to learn more, and also learn how they can help them as well. Through habitat management advice, we're improving the quality and connectivity of green spaces, so making them more suitable for butterfly and moth populations, but also looking to make sure they're connected as well, so making sure we've got those corridors between those green spaces in London. And of course, anything we do to help butterflies and moths will also help other wildlife as well. We also want to get people out and about recording butterflies and moths in London, so showing us what they find on their green sites. And this in turn will let us know how butterflies and moths are doing and how we can help them as well. So really making us able to target conservation efforts in the capital. And the project is also really important for increasing opportunities for butterfly conservation to engage with new audiences. So really, London is such a diverse place, and it's just such a good opportunity to be able to reach audiences that not just butterfly conservation, but also other conservation organisations have previously underserved as well. And finally, as Simon mentioned earlier, it's a real flagship project for butterfly conservation. So it's really going to help us develop and test new approaches to conservation in an urban context. And we'll be able to use those lessons in other urban areas as well. So we mentioned that we're working across 17 inner London boroughs. So that's just a snapshot of the boroughs there. And you can see that they're mostly centred around, inner London, but there's also a few on the outside as well. And we're really, really lucky to be supported by the 4 branches that cover London. So you can see which areas they cover on the map there. And all the branch volunteers have been just instrumental in the development of the project and now the delivery as well. So really offering that local expertise and knowledge and support there in each of the 4 corners of London. So that's a bit about the what the project involves and where it's happening. But what are we actually doing? So the project activities that we'll be running are divided into 3 main strands. So the first one is engagement. So as the engagement officer, this is the one that I oversee. So engagement is all about inspiring people and really encouraging them to learn more about butterflies and moths and green spaces as well. So in the engagement strands, the activities are a school engagement program, which I'll explain a bit more in a bit more detail on the next slide. Community events, so a really wide range of events to encourage lots of people to get involved. But also attending public events, so having a program of events that we'll attend. And again, really getting out there in the local community and spreading the word as well. And finally, in the engagement strand, we're also supporting Wild in the City in putting on their Nature Connectors training course. And again, I'll explain that in a bit more detail later on. So the second strand is recording and monitoring. So as I mentioned in a previous slide, it's all about teaching people more about how to identify butterflies and moths and how they can help us by recording them as well. So in that strand, the activities are identification and recording workshops. And also Steve is helping to establish those recording and monitoring schemes across London. So really getting that legacy and making sure we're getting that information and data that we need. And the final strand in the project is habitat management, which Steve will go through in a bit more detail later and tell you how he's getting on with that. But that is habitat management training workshops for different groups, offering site advice visits to give that tailored advice for green spaces, the use of a conservation budget to support green sites and spaces, and finally also improving site management plans. So again, trying to get that legacy written into those plans. So that's just a really brief introduction to the project, but we're now going to go through updates in our areas of work more specifically and let you know how we've been getting on. So I'm going to go through the engagement strand and then I'll pass over to Steve to go through the other 2 strands. So far in the project, I've delivered 13 school workshops across London, and those have been in 4 schools with a range of classes in the boroughs of Lewisham, Southwark and Wandsworth. And so far we've reached 344 children, which is great. And those school workshops start off with workshop 1. And workshop 1 is all about introducing children to really the beauty of butterflies and moths, and get them thinking about how they're linked to green spaces and how we can help them as well. And with that workshop, we do planting in the school grounds. So you can see on the right-hand side there that we've got a variety of plug plants, and those are all plug plants to support butterflies and moths. So things like caterpillar food plants and nectar sources as well. And it's just really, really great to get the children out into the green spaces in their schools or green spaces a bit further afield to really get them connecting with nature and thinking about how butterflies and moths link to their environment as well. And then on to workshop 2. So workshop 2 is all about the life cycle and adaptations and camouflage. So thinking about butterflies and moths in more detail. And yeah, really trying to get them engaged and think about you know, how great butterflies and moths are, not just for science but also for the environment as well. So workshop 2 is always really great because we're able to bring in live specimens. So we normally do a moth trap the night before, and also bring caterpillars as well. So you can see on the left-hand side, really lucky to be able to trap a lime hawk moth this year. And it's just such a good way of engaging children. And one of the comments that we had from the workshop was a child that was actually scared of all insects before, and then they went away saying that moths were their favorite animal. So yeah, just a really great way to connect with that audience. And another thing to mention that we've done since the start of the project is actually collaborated with the Winchester Science Centre. And the reason why we did this to produce the Brilliant Butterflies film is because we were slightly worried to start with about the impact of COVID. So when we started the project, there was still rising cases, and and we were worried about the school workshops being cancelled. So we worked with them to produce this film, which was really linked into the school workshops and primary school curriculum. And it looked at themes such as habitats, food chains, and life cycles as well. And we launched that at the same time as the Big Butterfly Count. And that was, again, to get children thinking about their local green spaces and get them out and about there too. And that actually reached over 700 teachers and in 200 schools. And it had over 17,000 views when we last checked. And obviously those weren't all from the project area, but we did look in more detail, and it did reach a number of schools in the Big City Butterflies project area. So just a bit more engagement there with primary schools as well. So as well as school workshops, we've been really busy delivering community events, and so far have delivered 14, and that's been with the help of volunteers from local branches and from the local community as well. So really couldn't have done it without them. And hopefully with this year of all of our community events, there'll be lots more opportunities to volunteer as well. So I can't go through all of the events in detail, but I thought I'd pick up on just a few to show you the variety of events that we've been able to run so far. So this slide is all photos from an event in Avery Hall Park, which is in southwest London. And it was quite a varied morning, and it was a family event. So we had lots of different ages there with their parents. And we started off the morning with a moth trap, which is always a bit of a winner with children. And the picture on the right-hand side is one of the participants, and she's looking at a Jersey tiger moth. So that was the moth of the day, I think. So just a really great way to show people the variety of moths that you can get. After the moth trap, we then did some planting. So similar to the school workshops, we make sure we've got plug plants that are caterpillar food plants or nectar sources, and explain to children the importance of those, and also helping children through helping the butterflies and moths through their life cycles as well. So again, linking it back to how important green spaces are. And you can see the top one is just children looking at a caterpillar there. So on to the next community engagement event. So this one was at Holland Park Ecology Centre, and this was in northwest London. And again, this one was an event aimed at families. So we've got a planting activity going on there, again with pollinator friendly food plants and nectar sources. The bottom left there is an activity we did in collaboration with Roots and Shoots, which is a community centre in Lambeth, alongside the Family Volunteering Club there. So that was all about looking at how local families can volunteer to help butterflies and moths. So we did some planting in the local area, and they were also able to take some home as well. And the final one on this slide is a butterfly walk, and that was with that was organised by the local branch, but also Tower Hamlets Cemetery Park volunteers as well. So that was a really great event. I think it was actually the hottest day of the year. So we saw lots and lots of different species, and that really highlighted just the diversity of Lepidoptera you get right in the middle of London centre. So on to some bigger ones now, because when we started the project, it was very much restricted in what we could do for community events. So we were able to sneak in a couple of bigger ones later on. So the top one is a butterfly community day that I helped organise with the Friends of Greendale Fields. And that was a really great day, lots of different activities from arts and crafts to walks and a bio-blitz as well. And actually there was such an appetite for it that they are now hoping to do that every year and invite their local community along as well. The bottom left picture is from Bansand Beds, which is in Lambeth in southwest London, and they invited us to attend a stall to celebrate their Feast and Car Free Day. So again, all about meeting the local community, and that was a really great day, and we got to talk to lots of different local families, residents, and some different partners as well. And on the right hand side, not as much a big event, but just another different one, which was moth trapping in Regent's Park. and another great type of community event that we can use for engagement as well. And you can see on the right hand side there's a ruby tiger moth, which was the star of the show that day. So it was really great to show local community the moths that they can find in their local park. And as well as those, there's been lots of different walks and talks and other events in boroughs like Wandsworth, Brent and Lewisham. And the last slide on community engagement events is just to show that we were even able to engage people in the winter. So this last one was in Beckenham Place Park, and this was in the autumn. And we cheated a little bit because there's no butterflies really out at that time. Obviously some species are, but mostly not. So we actually set up a butterfly trail with giant butterflies that you can see in the bottom picture there. And we tried to keep them in the habitats that they'd normally be in as well. But it actually worked really well, and it sort of turned into a bit of a big butterfly count, and they were all ticking the butterflies off their sheets and sort of running over to them, which was really lovely. And during that walk, we also focused on getting out in the green space as well and really connecting with it. So they collected lots of different items around the walk. A lot of it was leaves, but it was great because it was autumn. And then we went back to do some crafts, so making a collage out of the found items, and then on to do some planting as well. So those are the community events. So just a snapshot of what we've delivered so far. Last year, we also did 2 larger scale public events, which we often refer to as high footfall events. So you can see Simon in the top left picture there, and Simon helped me out at Nunhead Cemetery Open Day. And we estimated that we spoke to around, I think it was about 240 people in a few hours. So that was a really, really great day. And actually off the back of that event, I've now had lots of schools sign up to a school workshop. So it just shows how important it is to get out in the local community at events like that. And the second one there on the right hand side was our Bat and Moth Night, which is an online event. And we did it a slightly different way. So we had lots of different presentations and talks throughout the night. And it was live hosted by myself and a partner at BCT, so Back to Conservation Trust, who we were running the event with. And we got some really great feedback on that. So we're hoping to do another online event in that format again, because it really reaches a different audience as well. So just looking forward briefly before I hand you over to Steve. So this year we've got a number of high footfall events planned. So we've got 6 on the card. So that's things like Lambeth Country Show. And you can see the left-hand picture there is from the development year when Big City Butterflies was at Lambeth Country Show. And they speak to hundreds of people during that. So again, just a really great way to engage with the local community. We've already got over 20 school workshops booked in for this year. So I'm going to be really busy in March and throughout the summer with those workshops 1 and 2. And just to mention as well that the Garden Butterfly Survey is relaunching this spring. So it's a really, really good time to link that with the school workshops and the project. So thinking about that other strand of recording and monitoring and really linking them together and getting school children and teachers involved in recording as well. So as well as those, we've also got lots of community events planned as well. And really looking into offering a range and a real variety of events to suit lots of different audiences. So thinking about having activities like arts and crafts or photography as the hook, and then bringing in butterflies, moths and the environment as a secondary concept there. And yeah, just a couple of really exciting things that I've been working on in relation to art. We've got our community arts projects that we're in the process of developing with a really amazing artist called Bryony Bengay Abbott, and she's a British Trinidadian visual artist. And we're working on a big collaboration with her and with another gallery as well in London, so the William Morris Gallery. And it's all about bringing Black British conservation and climate activists together, as well as local communities, to explore identity in relation to nature. And that will culminate in an art installation during Black History Month. And there'll be lots of workshops for the local community to get involved as well. And that picture on the left-hand side is just an example of one of the workshops that Bryony runs as an artist in their wild drawing workshop. So again, thinking about that connection to nature and how we can really get people into nature in different ways. And finally, the last, looking forward just before handing over to Steve, is Wild in the City, so our relationship with this partner. And they're a really, really key partner in reaching different audiences. So just as a bit of background, what we'll be doing is supporting 2 Nature Connectors courses during the course of the project, so during the 4 years. And the first one is planned for 2022, so this year, and we're on track for that at the moment. And Nature Connectors supports people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds, all within London, and that's to feel more comfortable in nature and to increase knowledge and confidence in leading others to engage with nature as well. So it's a really, really important course. And hopefully through the project, we'll also be supporting their Nature Guides course, which, if you like, is the next stage up from the Nature Connectors course. So it's in more detail and it invites people back from the Nature Connectors course. And we're hoping to offer them study days, which will be focused on Lepidoptera, so passing on our skills and knowledge to help Wild in the City in another way as well. So that's it for the engagement update. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can pass you over to Steve, who'll go through updates in the remaining 2 strands as well.
Right. Right, there we go. Good evening, everybody. I hope you can see that. Yes, so I'm going to give you a bit of an update on what I've been up to and my role as the Conservation Officer. So Ellie shared this slide previously, and so yeah, my 2 areas of work are primarily recording and monitoring, which I'm going to go through first, and then talk to you a bit about habitat management as well. So yeah, in terms of the recording and monitoring activities, delivered 13 training workshops to date, and they tend to be borough-wide workshops, so working with different partners within the boroughs and different community groups to really target different people, different community groups within those boroughs. Yeah, we often do an online presentation, which works quite well, getting out to a wide variety of people within those boroughs and the sort of maximum reach, really. You can see some of the slides we go through there in terms of an introduction to Lepidoptera, what species you can see in London, going through some of those different butterfly species, and then some of the different recording techniques, different methods that you can see there, right from some of the beginner type surveys like big butterfly count and going into walking a transect and that type of thing. And then we always follow up with a guided walk on a local butterfly site to hopefully kind of put some of that into practice. So we've done some really great workshops across the project area that I mentioned. So 3 of those have been in North East London, working with some partners, particularly in Redbridge. So there's a good ranger team there in Redbridge who've been doing some good work across some of the nature reserves that they look after. So Fairlock Waters, that image on the right, is one of those. And they're actually looking to establish some transects and some more recording at that site. And we're really supporting them, publicising these the workshops and then the guided walks on that particular site. And we had a good turnout and quite a wide range of people coming along. And there's another site at Cloby Park in Redbridge where we're looking to do the same type of thing. We did another walk on that site. Then good age range of people. You can see some kids there enjoying an up-close view of the clouded yellow butterfly. You can see the image there, and many of the people on that walk had never seen a clouded yellow before, so that was great to be able to show them up close in particular. Then further workshops, we've done some, 5 in northwest London. And that's partly been focused on working with our partners in Brent and Gladstone Park in particular. And we've added some new records to the site there, and they were quite pleased, the site managers, to see Small Heath now recorded at the site, which this image shows the Small Heath, and also Marbled White making an appearance this year. And we're now working closely with the kind of friends groups there to establish a transect, which I'll talk more about in a minute. And then, south east London, we've got some really great partners, particularly in Lewisham, Brockley Cemetery is one of our key sites there, fantastic site for butterflies. And that was the focus for a walk that we gave on that particular site. And again, working with the friends groups there to follow up in terms of monitoring and surveying. So part of the outcome of that has been establishing new recording schemes on some different sites. So there's Albion Millennium Green in Lewisham, Brockley Cemetery that I mentioned, working with the friends groups there. Gladstone Park, which is shown in this slide. So we've established and set up a new transect route on the UK butterfly monitoring scheme that you can see in that slide. And we've got a small group of volunteers. They're going to start walking that transect this season. So I'll be going out with them one of their first walks to kind of do it in a small group and make sure we're doing it using the right methodology. That's a really interesting site, and the image on the right shows an area of acid grassland that is now being managed more sensitively, and this is where we saw the Small Heath and the Marble White butterflies. So that gives a bit of a snapshot of recording and monitoring, and then in terms of habitat management, we've done 30 site advice visits. And this is sort of building on some of the contacts that were established at the development phase. So we've got some really good links with different, both community groups and with council staff and managers. There's almost too many contacts to get in touch with straight away. So we've had to prioritise, but we've got a pretty good spread there. You can see that the blue markers are the kind of site advice visits, and then the pink just illustrate where we've been able to follow up and work to actually do some physical improvements on the ground. So over in the east, right across the Hainault Forest up there in East Brookend Country Park, southeast, we've got sites like Oxley's Meadows and Avery Hill Park, Wandsworth Common and Tooting Common in the southwest, and then over to Friant Country Park, and this is Gladstone Park on this side. So just to give you a bit of a flavour about what we're achieving on some of these sites and how we're able to follow up and support, I think Ellie mentioned we've got some conservation budget, so we can go in and support some of these sites with whether they need a bit of help with some contractors to come in and do some of the ground preparation or something like that to get things underway, or just supplying seed. So this is just an example from Dulwich Park, where they'd already been doing some really great work, and you can see in this image they had established some wildflower areas, wildflower beds, but actually they were primarily annual wildflowers, and didn't really have the variety of native perennials that we would like to see in terms of supporting different butterflies and moths. We recommended and encouraged them to actually clear those off at the end of the year, and as you know, annuals sort of finish flowering each year anyway and kind of need to be reseeded, so it's actually more sustainable to get a native perennial mix in there, which does include some annuals. So they cleared it for us, and we rotivated that area, which you can see in this image on the bottom right, and again working with the chap from the Dulwich Friends groups who helped us do the reseeding these areas. So it's going to take a little while to establish. So there will be some annuals to give a bit of colour this season, and act almost as a bit of a nurse crop for some of the perennials that will begin to become established, and then fully flower probably next year. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. And yeah, there's certainly other opportunities in that park. Yeah, that image of a small copper, which does use some of the annual wildflowers. But yes, they are beginning to relax mowing in quite a few areas around the edges of the park, which you can see in this bottom left image. And so there's real potential there to further enhance those areas with cut and collect to try and reduce the nutrient levels and encourage more wildflowers, potentially even some scarification and seeding as well. Another site in southwest London is on Clapham Common, and there's a really active kind of friends group and management committee there that have had some recent ambitious plans to introduce more scrub and more kind of woodland areas, and also hopefully to introduce more wildflower areas. So this image in the top right shows an area that is an area of kind of relaxed mowing. So it's not the close cropped amenity grass which covers most of the site, but it, although it is slightly longer grass, it's still fairly species poor and mainly ryegrass. And so working with the Friends group, we came up with this plan to really try and create some long-term meadow habitat that's going to require sort of reduced maintenance, if you like, by scraping off that nutrient-rich topsoil layer and using that to create kind of topsoil banks around the scraped area, which you can see there's 3 scrape areas that you can see here. And that will expose the underlying subsoil for creating a really great seed bed that should last quite a few years. We'll still need some management, but not nearly as much as some of the surrounding areas. And the banks will serve to form a bit of shelter around the meadow areas and also allow some scrub planting. So we've got both wildflowers and shrubs like hawthorn, blackthorn, buckthorn, which are going to provide some caterpillar food plants for both butterflies and moths. So it's quite an ambitious plan, and one we're really excited about. Lambeth have given it their approval, and the Friends group are actually funding the majority of that. With all that earth moving, it could well be quite a few £1,000s worth of work there. But yeah, a really exciting one to follow up on, and working with local volunteers, hopefully to help with things like planting, plug planting and seeding, and then going on to do butterfly recording on the site, so we can begin to monitor and see the changes that it's going to make over the next few years. Another example from southeast London, so Beckenham Place Park, and this image on the left shows an area on Crab Hill, I think it is, that has been managed quite well in terms of that cut and collect kind of mowing regime that encourages wildflowers, but actually it's still relatively species poor. So we wanted to try and improve that diversity of wildflowers, so encouraging more nectar sources like marjoram, knapweeds, oxeye daisy, that type of thing, but also caterpillar food plants like birds of trefoil. And this is a rotivation which breaks up that surface layer and exposes the bare ground so that we can do some seeding into that layer. So it's a bit of a trial almost to try it out in a sort of fairly still a reasonable size area, but one that if we know we can show how it's going to work, it could be rolled out into much bigger, wider areas. And they were also keen on trying a different method. And so the image on the bottom right shows some turf stripping using a little mini digger to strip off that top soil turf layer to create a seed bed in a slightly different way to the rotivation, and then we'll be monitoring the kind of difference between those two and seeing how they develop, and volunteers are going to be helping with that from the local park. And it's not all about wildflowers, so yeah, we're keen to support tree and shrub planting where we can. And so this example from Avery Hill Park, southeast London, working with the Friends group there, and they've started their own project, or a woodland creation project, in one area of the park. So we're really pleased to work with them and support them with some disease-resistant elms to support white-legged hairstreak butterfly, and buckthorn for brimstone butterfly, and other hedging plants which are going to support lots of different moth species as well. Then in Gladstone Park, so a few examples from northwest London, working with the Friends group that I mentioned before, in terms of the butterfly transects that they're keen on doing, and the council had already done some kind of wildflower areas and wildflower strips that you'll see in a minute, but we wanted to do work on creating some more of these, and again with the focus on native perennial wildflowers, to get that variety of wildflowers into the park, and also create a bit of a feature alongside the paths here so people can enjoy them, enjoy the wildflowers, and hopefully the butterflies that are going to come along and colonize these sites. And yeah, I have to admit, it was a bit of a battle. This is a turf cutting machine, which we hired, which did struggle. This longer grass that you can see here was a bit of a battle. So yeah, I'd recommend, if it's something that you're interested in, it works better on really quite thinner grass, and this area of clovers actually work quite well in terms of stripping that turf back for seeding. And yes, so Gladstone Park was part of Brent Speed Corridor project. So they had created these long strips where they had done some rotivation previously and seeded with primarily an annuals kind of seed mix. There were some perennials coming through like wild carrot and salad burnet, but you can see this cosmos in the background, bees, one that bees quite like, but not so good for butterflies. So we wanted to improve the diversity a little bit and just supplement and kind of add to what was already there. So there were a few little bare patches amongst the wildflowers, so we cleared and scraped back and sort of dug those over a little so we could do some native perennial seeding. And yeah, as I mentioned, this is going to form part of a new transect, so we'll really hope to see and monitor the differences and the changes in the butterfly populations over time. So yeah, in terms of a quick summary then of habitat management, so I've talked about some of those sites. So 5 sites improved for Lepidoptera, including 3.3 hectares of meadow creation enhancement, 46 trees planted. We've also done 3 habitat management training workshops, and this image on the bottom left at Highgate Cemetery illustrates one of those workshops, and they're yeah, the staff and volunteers, they're a really good bunch of guys that are doing some good work. They've got some existing areas of wildflower banks that they've already established, but they keen to do more. And potentially looking at where you have got open glade areas like this area, and sort of in a way unwanted vegetation on some of the grave tops that causes them an issue. If they can scrape that off and get a low nutrient kind of soil introduced into that area, we should be able to establish some wildflowers and actually reduce their maintenance kind of liability as well. So that's an interesting one that we're looking at with them. 3 site management plans improved for Lepidoptera as well. So this image at Holland Park kind of illustrates that, working closely with some of the site managers there at Holland Park, looking at different woodland management techniques to encourage butterflies and moths, and ensuring, yes, where they do have areas, there's very few areas of longer grass with wildflowers, and it's actually, this image shows one of those in an area which they refer to as an arboretum. So it's really highlighting the value of some of these longer grass areas, because yeah, they were talking about planting more trees, for example, in these areas, and we're just sort of highlighting the importance that yeah, please don't plant any more trees in these lovely open glades. Yes, there's been those habitat management training workshops. This is planned activities coming up in the near future over the next few months. So leading on from the previous workshops, we've got 3 more coming up in spring. So quite a few of those with Lewisham in Greenwich as well, and we're also beginning to plan in 10 ID and recording workshops, working with some of the different partners across the project area. And then, more site advice visits coming up and various improvements that we'd sort of discussed with different partners in the past. So this image from Brockwell Park in Lambeth, just to illustrate some of the site advice in terms of enhancing and improving some of the kind of existing areas of longer grass that we're looking to improve in terms of getting more wildflowers, more wildflower abundance, more wildflower diversity into these areas by doing some repeated cut and collecting to reduce the nutrient levels, and then monitoring it to see the results, and potentially doing some seeding in those areas as well. And you can see these little strips here, like we've seen in some previous images. Actually, Lambeth are buying their own quite powerful turf stripping machine, and so we want to utilise that and create some sort of feature wildflower strips as you kind of enter the park. So we're going to be working with them on that in the spring, which should be a nice little project, and we've got a number of these similar projects in other parks as well. Yes, in northwest London, working with Brent again, this Welsh Harp Environmental Centre is a good opportunity for us to work with them. They're looking to relaunch this centre, and I've got some money to sort of spruce it up and do some habitat improvements at the environmental centre there. So we're looking to support them with some meadow creation, but also improving the management of some of the woodland areas there as well. And just to mention a few things coming up in Northeast, then so we carry on working with some of our partners in Redbridge, and they've identified some good opportunities for some of the sites in Redbridge, and then this other site, Eastbrook End Country Park, where we visited recently. Some really great opportunities there. They've got fantastic big open space, actually, called the Dagenham Corridor. So it includes Eastbrook End Country Park. You've then got the Chase Nature Reserve and Beam Parklands. So there's a fantastic variety of habitat, supports lots of different species, and we're happy to work with them and support them with some improvements. Again, it's often some of the grasslands might be So I think, yes, that brings me to the end of my summary. Got some photo credits there from all the great photos we've had. And yes, we can take some questions, and I'll hand back over to Simon now and stop sharing.